Welcome back, everyone. It's Lights, Camera, Action. You know this is Make Our World Your Runway, and the weekly show that interviews the most fascinating individuals from the world of modeling, fashion, beauty, business, and even the entertainment industry. And as always, we have a very exciting show planned for you today. But before we begin, we always like to make a couple of announcements. And those first announcements that we make is we like to thank the sponsors who've made this show so possible every week. And that's the Global Trade Chamber, 100 Successful Women in Business, Lux Salon, Queen Beauty Network, Tower Club, Royal Dames, Vita Designs, 𝐘𝐿𝐷, and the Bangladesh American Chamber of Commerce. So sponsors, thank you so much for making the show possible every week. And we also want to tell our subscribers, remember to subscribe to the Global Trade Chamber YouTube channel so that you can see all the shows from Make Our World Your Runway and Success Stories. And I highly recommend that our viewers do tune into Success Stories because this show does feature the most amazing women in the world from business and community service. From their humble beginnings to successful entrepreneurs, these women will totally inspire you. And of course, get ready for some exciting conferences, speakers, and awards as the 100 Successful Women in Business and the Global Trade Chamber come to a city near you. And that next city is going to be, and it's a nationwide roadshow. It's going to be in Sunrise, Florida. It's a Women Business Expo. It's going to be on May 14th, and it's a full day of business conferences, networking, and connections designed to help women grow, scale, and lead. It's also free registration. Now, at these events, you see a business expo and vendors. You got expert speakers, high-impact networking, and nationwide exposure. And it's going to be from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on May 14th, which will be at the Civic Center in Sunrise, Florida. And as I said, it's a free event. But I've been there. These shows, they sell out months ahead of time. So for more information, you can go to the event at globaltradechamber.com or dial 954-839-8866 for further information. And that's to register, just to attend. But if you want to be a speaker, we do have opportunities available, and also there's vendor spaces available. And as I tell my viewers, you always know that Make Our World Your Runway will be there, and we will go live. So we hope to see you on May the 14th at the Civic Center in Sunrise, Florida. And now we are going to go on to our show. I have a wonderful, special, and exciting guest with me here today. He's a South Florida public leader and candidate for the Broward County Commission for District 6. He's a husband, father, and community advocate, and he's running to strengthen Broward's future by focusing on affordability, economic opportunity, and accountable local government. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Eugen Bold.
Thank you to your viewers. Thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah, it is. And I like what you said there, running on affordability, because that's on everybody's mind right now.
Right, and I think there's so much we can do about that at the local level, because oftentimes we look at what's happening on the national stage and we forget that most of our lives are impacted by what happens at the local level. Yes. And that sometimes is a city, that sometimes a county, sometimes a state government, but it's pretty close to home. Mm-hmm. And so getting involved and trying to fight for the right issues is very important at the local level.
It is very important on the local level. And it's so funny you should say that, because one day I happened to be up in Mayor Trantellis's office, and this is right after the election, and I had been speaking to him about, the presidency changing hands, and he says, look, not much I could do, he says, on a national level. He said, but, I know what I could do on a local level. He says, and how to make Fort Lauderdale really grow, and the vision that he had for that. And he said the same thing. He says, we focus so much on what's happening nationally and internationally that we forget what's happening in our own backyard.
That's right.
And I was pretty impressed with that, and you exactly say the same thing.
I mean, I'll give you an example. If you have accountable and transparent government that doesn't waste people's money on things that don't matter, that simply means maybe we can cut that tax rate, right? We can lower the taxes. That means we have better public transit, so that way maybe a lot of the folks in the working class, the younger folks in college, they don't have to buy a car, they can use public transit. That cuts another $500 from your monthly budget that you allocate for transportation. So you have all of these small things that, if aligned, if they work, it directly benefits the very people of that community.
Exactly. And you mentioned something, because I'm from the Northeast, infrastructure. plays a very important part anywhere, okay? And one of the things that we don't have enough here, and I've realized that, is mass transportation. Okay, now you've got Brightline, and I've noticed they're starting to add more cars because when they go past my place every day, it's a little bit longer for the gates to be down. But, you know, working in Manhattan and even in New Jersey, you know, we had New Jersey Transit. You had plenty of buses. And then, of course, when you got into New York City, you had the subways. You know, you had buses there. So we were able to leave the car home. Okay, once in a while, if I was going to go out after work, I would take my car into the city, you know, or I would park in Hoboken and take the train from there and then just, you know, go into the city. But down here, you don't have that. Okay.
South Florida, and specifically Broward and Palm Beach counties, they were not developed with mass transit in mind. And so the entire planning process did not account for the need of public transit. Right. And so now you have to retrofit almost and superimpose that, you know, vision onto an existing infrastructure and layout. Right. And you can do that. Now the mechanisms to get the money for that we already have. We gotta get close to $600 million per year in something called through the penny for transportation, which is a surtax that the county imposes on most transactions that happen in the county. So we have the money. Now all we need is the vision, right? And so we have up and down the coast, north, south, we have some train lines, but east and west, we don't really have any connectivity on rail or light rail, and that would be fantastic to emulate what happens in New Jersey, New York, Chicago, and some of the folks that, you know, some of the places where this works.
Exactly. I mean, New York City, if you didn't have mass transit, that would be a disaster. Okay. I mean, okay, you got the cab drivers on the street and they're crazy. But again, you know, with New York City, you got people that coming from New Jersey. You got people that coming from Pennsylvania, Connecticut, the tri-state area. Of course, you got people that live in New York City. But that would not be thriving if you didn't have that mass transit. All these people could get there and work. Okay. Absolutely. Because even Connecticut and even Pennsylvania have a lot of mass transit. Okay. I would have to say New Jersey was pretty good with that. You missed one train, you could get another. You know, if you were there at 7:30 and you missed a train, by 7:45, you had another one coming. Yeah. And it was easy.
And it's the easiest way to build economic development is to have reliable transit so that the workforce can move around the county and things can be fluid within a space. Right. And number two is build housing that is affordable, that works adjacent to those transit hubs. So that way the technical term they use is transit-oriented development. So you build these developments, it's like a live, work, and play kind of a hub around the transit. So that way folks don't need to buy a car or to get involved in some other complex, you know, investment when you can just live there, eat there, play there, hop on a rail and go whatever you need to go. So we got to figure out a way to just make life easier for people.
And you said something, affordability. And it's funny you should say that because, you know, when they talk about seniors, all right, and they come up with these commercials and they talk about all this living. Now, up near me, we have Devonshire, okay? So my husband and I, we got invited to a luncheon there. And they said, oh, yeah, we work with veterans, you know, whether it's present or somebody that, you know, is in the past. Okay, and I say to myself, you know what? They designed this place for not just any senior, but for somebody who's very wealthy. To get in there, it was $400,000 you had to put out. And I'm saying, well, if that's the case, you might as well. And you don't own it, okay? It's $400,000. And then it's like $4,000 or $5,000 a month. They said, oh, well, you got the golf course, you got this, you got that. And I'm like saying to myself, there are so many seniors out there that can't afford something like that. And why should it be, you know, and I'm not saying that, you know, if somebody became a millionaire when they worked for it, God bless them. God bless. I have no problem with that. But if you are that kind of a person, why are you not doing anything to try to help the person that doesn't have that? Why should there be that type of housing for just a certain group of people? But you've got so many seniors that can't afford that, okay? And like what you just said, make it affordable and easy living for people, right. You know? Living.
I think that's the key, easy living. And what I'm seeing, what we're seeing in our society now is it's less and less easy to live. It's harder to afford things. It's harder to move around. And especially if for me, it's painful to see someone that has worked all their lives and have served our country. They've built things, they've created value, contributed to our communities in so many ways, and now they can no longer afford to live a decent, dignified life. That is a problem, and it shouldn't just be a problem for me, it should be a problem for the entire political establishment in this country.
Thank you. It should be, yes. Because I'll tell you why. You know, I'm very fortunate. I have good health care. My husband's a veteran. At times I can use the veterans, okay? Because there was a law that was passed at one time was only the veteran. Now the wife can also use certain things with the veteran. And this last time when I was in the hospital, and I have a saying, health care is not a privilege, it's a right. You never know when you're going to get sick, or you never know when you're going to need something. And there's so many people out there that don't have the type health care that I have, okay? When I was in the hospital, and there was a woman that was in the room next to me, and I was talking to the nurse, and I said, why isn't she getting the same attention that I'm getting? And she didn't say anything. I said, I think I know why, because she probably doesn't have the same health care that I have. Well, we have to get her on charity care. We have to find out what doctors. I'm saying, this is ridiculous, okay? I said, it's stupid. I said, that should not matter, whether you have $1 or you have $1 million. Everybody should have the same type of health care. Why is it somebody like me walks in and gets the top, and another person comes in? And I feel guilty like that. I really do. I almost said, I feel like taking my heart out and giving to that person that's next to me, because it's not right, okay? And then sometimes, like you say, a lot of our veterans are homeless. You walk on the street and like, why? You know, I was just recently at a place, and then I have to say, maybe I'm not the most religious person in the world, but I was at Reyes Radiology, and I was getting an x-ray done. And I was sitting in that room, and I saw so many sick people. It just breaks my heart, okay? And this one gentleman I was talking to, he said, yeah, my wife had a stroke, and I'm it now. He says, and I'm trying to get money, he said, to get more medical care. And I just went up outside, and I looked at the sky, and I said, God, why? Because it breaks my heart. Because I say, you know, here I am walking around carefree, and I mean, I do have medical issues myself, but there's a lot of people that do, but just can't get the help.
And we have a system that has the wrong incentives. The incentive is let's make money off of people as opposed to let's heal people.
Thank you.
And so that's really where the core issue is, and that's why a pill that maybe in Canada or Europe costs $5 or what, you know, it costs like $75 here because the incentive structure is inverted. And so that's where the government can come in and say, listen, you know, we're a capitalist country, we believe in free markets. However, there are some categories within that market, such as healthcare, such as medication, where we shouldn't just allow people to just add whatever they feel like it in terms of profits. You shouldn't be able to make, you know, a 10,000x profit on cancer medication. That's just morally wrong. That is literally killing people who cannot afford it. And while we do have some people that can afford it, we got to make sure that every single person who's going through the worst part of their existence, which is dealing with a terminal disease, they have access to the type of care that is dignified and allows them to have another chance at life.
Exactly.
And so that's why I feel like, you know, and listen, I grew up in a socialist country. I grew up in Romania. I grew up in breadlines. I'm quite familiar with the socialist system, and I don't believe it offers the kind of benefits that some seem to believe it does. It doesn't work. However, I do believe in a capitalism with humane face, where we don't forget about the most vulnerable populations in our society, and we just ignore the pain of our most, let's say, brave men and women, since we talked about the veterans.
Veterans, oh yeah, the brave, exactly, the brave men and women. And I was very lucky, because when I was going through a period of my life when I had to have my hip operated on. And at that point, the healthcare system changed. My mother was working for the 211 Crisis Center in Palm Beach, and she said, no, my mother got me a healthcare plan. I think I paid like $125 a month, but it was excellent. And when I had my hip operated on, if I didn't have that type of health care, it would have been an $80,000 operation. I was very, very fortunate to get a great orthopedic surgeon who was also a neurosurgeon. And Dr. Matusek, I'll never forget. Most people look at me and say, "You've had a full hip operation?" I said, "Yeah, I had my whole left hip replaced." Wow. He was amazing. He was amazing. My husband always said, when I looked at him, he said, it looked like he was a deer in a headlight. He says, "That's the guy that's going to operate on you." But when I had the operation, my husband said, "You couldn't shut him up." And because I was on this special, health care, he was a former captain of the United States Air Force. He said, "I did operations," he says, "with bullets going over us." He did not take a dime for my surgery. And when he heard Al was in the Air Force, he says, "No." He said, "This is a done deal." And and what he did back then, which a lot of people, everybody talks about AI. AI was kind of around back then, but nobody really knew about it. He kind of used it because what he did with my hip, because he was a neurosurgeon, they just basically do the hip here. He took the new hip that he put in and he connected it right back to the spine, because being a neurosurgeon, that the brain was actually sending wavelengths. Wow. You mean, the day I got out of that surgery, I was 4.5 inches gated on one side until he did that surgery. My mother, and she rest in peace, she was still alive back then, she looked at me and she said, "You are perfectly straight." My leg went right down, okay? I had a walker for 1 week, a cane for 1 week, and then after that, I just walked like it was nothing.
Amazing.
And we had more doctors like that. He did not take a dime for that surgery, but look at the job that he did. And that was somebody that was from the United States Air Force. My husband, who had, he had open heart surgery, and they had to replace his aorta valve. Dr. Karras, captain in the United States Air Force. If you look at my husband, he doesn't look like, doesn't even have a scar, okay? Again, veterans. So these people, like you say, have given their life, and look at what they're doing, not only for in service, but when they come out of service, look at what they're doing for people.
That's right.
Yeah.
And listen, when it comes to housing, that's another issue. Oh. So in Broward County alone, we spent about $46 million roughly on homeless services, right, in addition to what some of the municipalities are spending. And unfortunately, we see still far too many people on the street. And so we have to optimize the way we deliver services in government in order to actually make a difference on an issue like this one. And a lot of veterans as well. I've talked to a bunch of folks on the street, they are veteran.
I've done the same thing.
And it breaks my heart, and I find that unacceptable, that the people who have been willing to lay down their lives for this nation, for us to allow them to sleep on a sidewalk, that's unacceptable.
And it's so funny, when Mayor Trantelis gave his State of the City address back in January, I had gone. And he brought 3 people up on the stage, and he told his people, he said, he was doing something tremendous. He took those 3 people that were veterans off the street, got them apartments, got them jobs. He says, these people need to have a life. And I've done the exact same thing. I went down Los Olas Boulevard not too long ago. I could not believe the homeless people and signs, "I'm a veteran." I started talking to them. I could not believe what I was hearing and even seeing. I said, this is unacceptable. Yep. You go and you fight for the country. I always tell people, I would not be here if it wasn't for our veterans. My father was a World War II veteran. He was the lead destroyer in D-Day. He was in the United States Navy. And he was telling me, he said, they had the orders to just circle the beach. But when they saw, the Army, the fellows were coming off the boats, and the Germans were hiding in the sand, just like the Japanese would do. And when they started to see that too many of them were getting killed, he said, when the orders came down from Washington and they told, the Navy, now fire the guns. He said, we fired the guns. He said, that was the end of that. The Air Force came in, closed the door. He says, and that's when we went into Auschwitz and stopped, he said, the concentration camps. And they said it was General Eisenhower, as I was reading that the night before went out to see these boys, and he knew a lot of them weren't going to come home, 18 and 19 years old. He knew a lot of them were not going to come home. But look what we did, okay? And these are the same people sometimes that you see on the street. And I always say, I wouldn't be here. Half my family was in World War II, in the military. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for the men and women that go there.
We wouldn't have the life that we have. We wouldn't have the freedoms that we have. And this is one thing that I would absolutely advocate for as well.
Yes.
Civic education. We need to know who we are as a nation and the values that have made us into a great nation. I feel that's very important, and we need to educate the new generation into what those values are and how we can exemplify them, whether it means volunteering to help a veteran, a veterans organization. Honor Flight South Florida is one of the best organizations I came across. I don't know if you're familiar. They essentially take veterans for one day to Washington, D.C. They call them angels, as in like someone that walks, and if they need to push a wheelchair, they push the veteran onto the plane, and then off the plane in Washington, D.C. to take them to all the monuments, to show them all the World War I, World War II, everything that's to be seen in Washington, and they put them back on a plane. And when they return, the community gets together in Fort Lauderdale at the airport.
I've seen that, yes.
And welcomes them, and thanks them for their service. And kids draw paintings, and they do all sorts of stuff to thank these veterans for the service. It's a beautiful organization, and we need to do more of that, I feel, to honor those that have given so much.
I saw that, and I think it was not last year, but the year before, when they arrived in Washington, former President Barack Obama was there to greet them. And he said, you people need to be honored. And I thought that was wonderful. I really did, because it's true, and it's a shame when you see something like that. It really is. And when a veteran can't be in a home or they can't get a job, something is wrong with that.
And that's not a left or right issue. I mean, listen, as you know, I'm running for county commission, but I don't, a lot of the issues that we talk about, they're human issues, they're societal issues, they're people issues. So let's talk about affordability. People cannot afford things. How can we make it where they can afford things? Exactly. How can we change that? If we talk about honoring our veterans and honoring their service, how can we do more about that? Educating our new generations into honoring and respecting the legacy that was given to them, that is being given to them. How can we do that? So I feel like those in politics who actually want to make a difference, they should focus on issues that matter, as opposed to slogans and all sorts of empty promises and fist in the air type of do nothing kind of rhetoric, as opposed to meaningfully address the things that are especially within the purview of the body you're seeking. So there's so much that can be done if, by good people who want to change the world for the better.
To change it. And you're right, sometimes it's not a right or a left issue. And I tell people, I said, look, I'm a very bipartisan person. I said, if it depends on who's on the right or the left or going down the middle. If they're doing the right thing, I'm for them. I said, I really don't have a problem with that. And you're right, these are human issues, and people always say to me, oh, well, this guy got in, he didn't do anything. This guy got, I said, well, do you ever read history? And people look at me and they go, well, I said, okay, what about FDR? Social Security, started the UN, okay? And FDR was a wealthy man when he was in office. I said, he was not a poor man, but he was for the people. He was for the people. I said, and think, I've had a lot of people say, well, he baited the Japanese for World War II. I said, no, read your history. That was not true. I said, the Japanese ambassador was sitting in his office that day where Pearl Harbor was getting bombed. Okay? I said, that was not true. I said, if you read history, he did not want to bomb Japan because he knew there were women and little children. He told the Japanese ambassador, surrender now, and it's over with. And on his deathbed, he told Truman, you have no choice. You got to drop the bomb. And when he did, and I said, but look at the accomplishments of FDR. And when he started Social Security, not too long ago on President's Day, they played the speech that he made. He said, because mature generation, when they get to a certain age, they've done their bit, he said, for their country. He says they should have an income coming in where they can retire and live a wonderful life. Okay, so I said, now, it had nothing to do with a right or left issue. That was just being a human being.
Right. Doing the right thing.
Yeah, he did the right thing. And I have to say this. We all know President Nixon resigned, but President Nixon did something when I was in high school. He was supposed to he did make Jersey a campaign stop, but when he saw, a lot of people didn't know, he was very much for education. When he saw that 𝐘𝐿 because it was always New York and California always wanted to. When he saw that the 𝐘𝐿 school system, all of a sudden from number 20 came up to number 3, he said, I got to go there. What are they doing? He said, I've got to see what's going on. He came to 𝐘𝐿. He made that a campaign stop, but he sat with the principal, and they were telling him we were actually getting college courses in high school because he wanted to know why we were so advanced. And when he heard that, he adopted that through the whole country. He had adopted, back then, he had adopted that. And he says, look, this is not about politics. This is about the future of our country and the children. He said, that will go on to maybe become. He said, might be somebody here might be sitting in my chair someday. So that, if anything, that was something that he did. But like you said, that wasn't a right or a left issue. That was about children going forward, progress. And I always tell people, 𝐘𝐿 High School, I felt like I walked out of there with a college degree because I was able to get into so many different things. But again, if that was not done, okay, and that was looking to the benefit of the future, that's it. Okay, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. You know, people always say to me, you can talk. I said, yeah. I said, if you know the English department we had in 𝐘𝐿 High School, I said, it was amazing. We have to stand up every day, I said, and just talk. I said, you know, I took English literature and English, English grammar. I said, they had a program called developmental reading. And you had to go up in front of the principal and several teachers, and I did. And you were supposed to take it a half a year in order to graduate. I came home and told my mother, I said, they told me I don't have to take it. My mother didn't believe me. She called the school. They said, Angela's got a proverbial gift to give. They said, she didn't stutter at all. She don't need to take it. I said, okay, I don't need to take it. But my mother wasn't convinced. She thought I was trying to get out of that class. I said, no, I'm not trying to get out of it. I said, they told me I didn't have to take it.
And what's amazing is that without knowing back then, the education system prepared you for the AI age.
It did.
Because right now, they did studies, an AI can perform better than an engineer on some tasks, better than a doctor on some tasks, better than, you know, a construction company on some tasks when it comes to developing a plan or a vision, you know, that obviously someone would have to build it. And so what's going to be very, very important for us is communication, empathy, soft skills, humanities, understanding history, preventing wars and atrocities, being kind, all of the things that for a long time we were told, well, they don't matter that much. You need to do STEM. You need to do physics and math and chemistry and all this stuff. And now we live in an age where all of those things are, of course, very important, but the AI will play such a huge role in assisting the human race with all of those skill sets. Exactly. What we need is to remain human and to advance the skills that make us human.
Thank you. You just put the nail on the head. It's like when the internet first came out. It was not supposed to take jobs away. It was supposed to aid and things that we were doing, but still keep the humanity about ourselves. That's it. That's it. But anyway, Max over here is telling me we've got about 5 minutes. And speaking about AI, I guess I was way advanced because when they tested me as a little kid, they came out and told my mother I tested on a genius level. So I guess I was AI at 6 years old.
I'm not surprised.
Oh, I'm surprised. But anyway, with 5 minutes left, what would you like to tell our viewers? I love that slogan, be bold. So,
listen, I think we have a great opportunity to change the world for the better. That's why I'm doing this. You know, I'm sure that's why you're doing this, right? Yes. We have short lives on this earth, and let's live with impact. Let's make an impact, and a positive one, in the lives of those around us, whatever we are. Now, you're in the space, you have an amazing platform, and you're using it successfully to reach out to the not just the minds, but the souls of your audience. My sandbox is right now Broward County, and I'm running for office because I want to bring change to a government that I believe is stuck, 4 or 5 decades behind in terms of how it operates, how it delivers services. I want to help on affordability. I want to help on public transit. I want to help on infrastructure, on public safety, on things that actually matter for our residents. I want to focus on vulnerable populations that have been forgotten for too long. Because oftentimes, and like I said, bless the haves, but the have-nots have been often forgotten in a lot of these rooms that I've been a part of. And so I want to bring the attention and the focus on those that have been left out of the conversation for far too long and deserve to have a seat at the table.
Right.
And I say that as someone who has been, you know, in a very impoverished environment in a communist country, who didn't have anything, came here, and who respects, honors, and appreciates the blessings that come with living in the United States. But I believe we got to make it easier for more people to enjoy them.
That was so perfectly said. I could have never done it better than myself. But anyway, Eugen, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show today. I hope you will come back again. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed it. It was a very, very informative show. And as always, we're going to be back next week with another great show. It's going to be a recap on the Academy Awards and, of course, the crowning of 2 Miss International World ladies and, of course, the wonderful Tower Club that did a great job with the envelope, please. So thank you for joining in to Make Our World Your Runway, and we will see you next time with another great show.